With the US accusing Pakistan of sheltering militants and following those allegations with yet more drone strikes on Pakistani soil, things are not looking at all rosy for Washington-Islamabad ties. Are the two countries set to part ways? Stay with news analysis.
The United States cannot live with us. It cannot live without us either. That's how Pakistan's Prime Minister describes relations between his country and the United States. Relations between the two allies have strained in recent weeks over accusations that Pakistan supports a terrorist network called Haqqani. Washington accuses the group of carrying out attacks against its installations and troops in Afghanistan. The accusation was first raised by U.S. Chief of Staff Admiral Mike Mullen last Thursday.
The Haqqani network, for one, acts as a veritable arm of Pakistan's internal services intelligence agency. With ISI support, Haqqani operatives planned and conducted that truck bomb attack, as well as the assault on our embassy. We also have credible intelligence that they were behind the June 28th attack on the Intercontinental Hotel in Kabul and a host of other smaller but effective operations.
Later came threats of military action against Pakistan by U.S. Senator Lindsey Graham.
Secretary Panetta said the idea of Pakistan intelligence agencies supporting terrorism as a national strategy needs to come to an end. It destabilizes Afghanistan. They're killing American soldiers. If they continue to embrace terrorism as a part of their national strategy, we're going to have to put all options on the table, including defending our troops.
Pakistan denies the allegations and warns the United States could risk losing an ally in the region.
We strongly reject assertions of complicity with Haqqanis or of proxy war.
Pakistan's foreign minister, meanwhile, says the Haqqani group has long been, quote, CIA's blue-eyed boy. Pakistani officials say U.S. drone attacks and unilateral military actions have instigated anti-American sentiments in the country and led to attacks against the United States.
We are a sovereign country, and how can they come and raid in our country? Negative messaging, naturally that is disturbing my people.
Apparently, a U.S. attack that allegedly killed al-Qaeda leader Osama bin Laden in Pakistan is still a source of friction.
Earlier, when there was a unilateral action in Abbottabad, that was a lot of resentment when we were working together and we were friends and there had been intelligence sharing. They could have shared the information with us and we could have done jointly.
Despite all its accusations against Islamabad, Washington is giving Pakistan nearly $2 billion in aid every year. The money is supposed to be used to fight terrorists, but no one knows if this money is being put into good use.
Well, let's get more now from Gareth Porter, investigative journalist joining us from Washington, Mr. Shahid Qureshi, political analyst in London, and Mr. Saeed Ali Wasif, the director of the Society for International Reforms and Research, joining us from Washington. Now, I'll start my first question with Gareth Porter. Mr. Porter, let's start with that allegations about the Haqqani network and Pakistan denying that it has any involvement with them. First of all, what information is out there about the Haqqani network? When and why was this network born?
The Haqqani network is a force, a very important guerrilla force of Pashtun fighters, which really has its origins in the jihadist resistance to the Soviet occupation of Afghanistan in the 1980s, of course supported by both ISI and by the CIA during that decade. And more recently, the Haqqani network has enlisted in support of Mullah Omar's Taliban movement. In fact, he was one of the first non-Taliban jihadists from the anti-Soviet period to actually give his loyalty to Mullah Omar in 1996. And since then, there's been no sign that that loyalty to Mullah Omar has faltered. Now, the complication here with the U.S. attack on Pakistan's government and military over its links with the Haqqani network is that The United States government has known about the very close ties between the ISI and the Haqqani network for years, going back certainly to the early period of the George W. Bush administration. And what has happened is that both the Bush administration and the Obama administration have decided for their own political and policy purposes to soft pedal this problem. And the obvious reason is that to draw attention to the problem would be to really question the wisdom of the U.S. policy of trying to defeat the Taliban insurgency in Afghanistan, given the key role that the Haqqani network plays in that war.
Well, Mr. Porter, let's just stop you there and bring in Mr. Qureshi on this as well. Mr. Qureshi, I'd like to see if you agree with that remark made there by Gareth Porter, that in fact Washington has been knowing about this rather link between the Haqqani network and the ISI, but that it's chosen this specific time to make this allegation, as the Pakistani foreign minister was saying this is a policy decision. What's your take on that?
Well, keeping in view the U.S. policy in the past 60 years, that it creates friends for a few years, then the same friends become enemies, and then the Americans fight with them. I think it is a repeat of what happened with Saddam. Saddam was America's friend. Saddam fought with Iran, and then the Americans fought with Saddam, and then in the end Saddam was killed by the Americans themselves. And this is the same kind of strategy with the Americans, that they kill their friends more frequently than they kill their enemies. And the American enemies are mostly lies in the Wall Street, who have robbed the U.S. government and the U.S. people billions and trillions of dollars. And the U.S. is looking for those petty people with AK-47 and 4x4s in some mountains, and they are thinking that they are their biggest enemies. Their biggest enemies in the Wall Street. If the Americans are really, really serious about stopping this war, then they need to stop in Afghanistan, which is costing them about $7 billion a month.
Right,
they will find another enemy like Mickey Mouse from Disneyland. Can I just stop you there, Mr. Qureshi, if I may, because before we move on with the discussion, I'd just like to bring Mr. Wasif's view on this as well. Mr. Wasif, just speaking about the Pakistani response to these allegations, the Pakistani foreign minister, she was saying that the Haqqani group was in fact the CIA's blue-eyed boy for years, quoting her. Now, how true is that allegation, and is this really about blaming one another and of course bringing up accusations that already existed before and were a fact, though they were not announced publicly?
In international relations, no country or no friend is permanent, and no enemy is permanent. So this ongoing blame game between Pakistan and the United States is part of that relationship, and it had been so for the last 4 decades or so. So as far as the Haqqani network is concerned, it has been the tool in the hands of both the CIA and the ISI for their own ends. So now that they are having a differences on the Afghan policy vis-a-vis the withdrawal of the American forces and the fate of future Afghanistan and the parties concerned within Afghanistan. So this is the main problem. And if you have an overview of Pakistan's domestic policy and politics, you'll know that Pakistan is currently a hostage at the hands of the military. So we do not see any kind of coherence between Pakistan's foreign policy, social policy, religious policy, economic policy, and domestic policy. All policies are made at the behest of the military generals in Rawalpindi. So the state is totally a militarized state, a kind of a police state in the shape of being run by the military. And the political leadership of Pakistan, the president of Pakistan, the prime minister, are totally and merely political uniques. They are political uniques. They do not have a courage to face the military and to change the decision.
Right,
For that matter, you can see that the newly inducted foreign minister of Pakistan, who is a young lady, inexperienced young lady, is a part of that strategy of the military.
Right. Okay. Mr. Gareth Porter, another allegation that's been, of course, raised for a long time now by the U.S. against Pakistan is that it's not doing enough to fight militants. Why do you think we're not seeing that offensive being launched against the militants in the North Waziristan area. What is stopping the Pakistani military from launching an offensive there?
Well, you're right. First of all, the United States, particularly the Obama administration, has been publicly pressuring the military in Pakistan to carry out a major offensive against the Haqqani network's territory in North Waziristan for the last year and a half to 2 years. And of course, Pakistan has resisted that firmly throughout that period. And you asked the question, why has the U.S. now decided to go to the next level of pressure by making threats to Pakistan of unilateral action if the Pakistanis do not do something about these ties? The answer is quite simple, that over the last several months, during 2011, the level of attacks by the Haqqani network in Afghanistan has exploded. According to the New York Times, it's 5 times more attacks in Afghanistan by that network in 2011 so far than there were in the same period last year. And even more important, of course, the U.S. government was embarrassed by the high-profile attacks against a NATO base which wounded 77 U.S. troops, and the attack on the U.S. Embassy and the headquarters of the U.S. NATO command in Kabul earlier this month. And I think that's why the U.S. now feels politically that it has no choice but to lash out and blame Pakistan for this.
Right.
Now, why does Pakistan not respond? I think primarily the reason is because the Haqqani network is not just an instrument of Pakistani policy in Afghanistan, although it is that, but even more important to the Pakistani military and government is the fact that the Haqqani network is actually an ally against the Pakistani terrorists, the TTP and the Al-Qaeda terrorists within Pakistan who have targeted the Pakistani government and military. The Haqqani network totally opposes attacks on the Pakistani government and military, and they have succeeded. They've helped the Pakistani government in weaning away from the Pakistani terrorists some of the key commanders. So I think that's really a strategic argument, which, by the way, the Pakistanis have never shared with the U.S. government, interestingly enough.
Right, okay, let's put this next question to Mr. Qureshi now. Mr. Qureshi, Gareth Porter just mentioning there that the attacks from the Haqqani network on Pakistan have been increasing, that the US has been facing now this public embarrassment, rather, this pressure to increase the pressure again on Pakistan to fight these militants. Now, what do you think about this? Do you think that the Pakistani government is rather for a political or negotiated kind of deal with these militants in North Waziristan? Why is it not putting that extra pressure or launching that offensive against these militants? What is the purpose for that?
Well, let me put the things in perspective, the numbers in perspective. The total number of U.S. And the Allied soldiers killed in the bordering region of Pakistan was about 312 or something. And the total number of people who were killed inside Afghanistan by the Afghan militants is over 1,200. So that argument that the Pakistanis sending their troops to or militants to fight with the U.S. forces from this side of the border is not valid, because they have about 140,000 troops and more than 1,000 posts on this side. What the Americans got on the other side? None. What the Americans got on the other side, they have anti-Pakistan terrorist networks operating against Pakistani soil in Balochistan. Inside Pakistan, they are promoting the Indian-sponsored terrorist camps inside Afghanistan, which are sponsored by the U.S. government, of course, and the allies. Now, this kind of mistrust is going on, and as I said earlier on, this Haqqani network was in the picture for a while, and we were just waiting for at what time is going to go for the U.S. to make it more visible, to put more pressure on Pakistan. The real problem is the occupation of Afghanistan, and the Americans must understand the sooner they leave, the better. And at the same time, both parties should not underestimate each other. The U.S. and the Pakistanis should not underestimate each other, that if the Americans attack Pakistan or the Pakistanis respond or retaliate, what would be what kind of the retaliation? Pakistan is not Iraq. Pakistan is not Afghanistan.
Right.
So if the U.S. is facing, if they think that they're going to bomb the cities of Pakistan and all the installations and they're going to have a happy life everywhere, That's not going to happen.
Okay, that is
Pakistan
the major question now, Mr. Qureshi. The question of a military attack. Sorry for stopping you there. The question of a military attack on Pakistan. Let's put this to Mr. Wasif. Mr. Wasif, so do you think that U.S. drone strikes, for instance, that have been increasing now, and today we had the latest one happening, leading to casualties as well, where does this stand in the equation? Does this show that the U.S. military is intensifying these drone strikes as a statement to the Pakistani government about this fight with the militants?
Well, true to his Pakistani background, Mr. Qureshi has just reflected the ill sentiments of Pakistani identity, though I also share the same background. But unfortunately, I live in a real world. And the problem with the likes of Mr. Qureshi is they side with the establishment, with the military of Pakistan, and not with the people of Pakistan. And I assure you that the Pakistan's military is a paper tiger. They will not respond to any attack by the United States. And the second thing is, I don't see any kind of attack from the United States because the Obama administration, being Democrats, they lack the will to make final decisions on such kind of events. So at both sides, I don't see any kind of will and any kind of courage to face head-on. So I don't think there will be any attack by the United States, and I don't think that the Pakistani military has a courage to give a formidable, powerful response, because the generals are corrupt, the generals are weak, the generals lack decision-making, the generals of Pakistani military, they lack legitimacy and popular support. This is the main problem, that the military takes advantage of the situation in Pakistan and manipulates the domestic and foreign policy affairs and to its own end. So I don't think there is going to be any kind of confrontation head-on head-on collision between the United States and Pakistan.
Let's bring in a quote here.
I would like to respond to Mr. Wasif.
Yes, I'll come back to you, Mr. Qureshi. I'll come back to you with that response. But first, let's go to Gareth Porter on the question of the U.S. possible military attack or invasion of Pakistan. Referring to Pakistan's supposed support of militant activities, Defense Secretary Liam Panetta has said that we're not going to allow these types of attacks to go on. And some people have been interpreting this as a threat to invade or attack Pakistan. What's your view on that?
I don't think it's going to happen. I just wrote a story today for Interpress Service suggesting that, in fact, the Obama administration was really feeling politically obliged by its own political interests to have a strong rhetorical response to the situation of much bigger, more high-profile Haqqani network attacks on U.S. forces and high-profile targets in Kabul. But they have no intention of launching a ground attack or allowing the special forces to carry out a major raid within North Waziristan. I think it's clearly understood that that would be a disastrous policy. And even the, I think, relatively mild rhetorical threats that were uttered last week have certainly played into the hands of the Pakistani military. I think they feel that they're sitting pretty now. They have very strong popular support rallying behind them, pushing the Pakistani military to take a very hard line towards the United States.
Yeah.
There's an unprecedented degree of support for a very strong anti-U.S. line on the part of the government and military right now in Pakistan.
Right, Mr. Qureshi, let's have your view on this as well. And first of all, I'd just like to ask you, do you think that if we say that the U.S. is not after war with Pakistan, it's not even after cutting relations with Pakistan, that Pakistan, however, is prepared to do that, and it has now reached that stage that it would part ways with Washington? Do you think that is now a possibility from the side of Pakistan?
Well, first of all, I'll respond to the gentleman in Washington. I don't think the gentleman in Washington really knows what goes on in Afghanistan, where the U.S. paper soldiers are paying to the Taliban to keep peace in most provinces, and that was proved by when the Italians left the area and the French took over, and it was a big story that how they are paying in money to keep the peace with the local Talibans. So that will show how bravely the U.S. soldiers are fighting. And let's not go down that road that who's fighting bravely and we are talking about the people of Pakistan and the people in Afghanistan, especially if the links between the regional friends like Iran, Pakistan, Turkey could be strengthened, then that can create a further dialogue between the people and the other powers, especially the U.S., who's on its way out, costing $7 billion a month. And also, I would like to mention to my friend in Washington, the injured soldiers, the wounded soldiers, the killed soldiers who arrived in the middle of the night in the U.S., not to show to the U.S. public is also to demoralize, also taking away all those destroyed weaponry, destroyed tanks and the armored APCs back to U.S. in the containers. That is to do with the morals of the U.S. soldiers fighting in Afghanistan. Let's save the lives of all sides, the Afghanis and the U.S., by moving out of this mess. And sooner you move out of this mess, the better, instead of blaming your friends. That's what the Americans did in Iraq, that's what the Americans did in Vietnam, blaming Iran, blaming other countries that they are doing this. The real problem is the occupation. This is an illegal occupation in Iraq as well as in Afghanistan. And my friend in Washington must understand that the real enemies of your country, where you are sitting now, or your adopted country, are the bankers in the Wall Street, where the people are have been conned in the broad daylight.
Let's allow Mr. Wasif to respond to that.
The real enemy, Mr. Qureshi, the real enemy of the Pakistani people and the integrity and solidarity and sovereignty of Pakistan is its military forces, unfortunately, and not the people. And I'm not talking about the American foreign policy. I'm not a spokesman of Obama. And I don't get any check from the CIA or from the White House, as you may be getting a check from the ISI services. I'm sure about that.
Okay, Mr.
The problem
Wasif,
with this kind of mindset, which you are reflecting at this moment, Mr. Qureshi.
Mr. Wasif, we are running out of time. I'd just like to put this question to you, if I may, before the program ends, and that is, what do you think then, when we speak of the Pakistani military and government facing the US, the extent of drone strikes continuing, and the local embarrassments continuing for the Pakistani government? Is Pakistan reaching that stage where it's going to decide to let go of the United States, rather to let go of what people have been calling its dependence on US policies?
Never. Pakistan is totally dependent on America, and it will do so in the future as well. The generals in Pakistan are the decision makers, and they do not want to cut their share, their lion's share of petrodollars and dollars from the United States as well. And the second thing is, if Pakistan wants to show an anti-American policy, it should first distance itself from the Saudi Arabian monarchy, which is a stooge and puppet of the United States in that region. So what Saudi forces are doing in Pakistan and the Saudi intelligence agency people are doing in Pakistan, if you are anti-American. So it's a double game they are playing.
Right.
If you want to do something relevant, join hands with the anti-American
Mr. Wasif, I'll just stop you there, because I have to stop you there because we're running out of time. I'd like to put the last question to Mr. Gareth Porter. Mr. Porter, if you could just tell us in less than a minute, what do you think is at stake both for Washington and for Islamabad? Who's going to lose the most if this relation is totally strained? If you could just tell us that very quickly.
I think that it's true that Pakistan holds the high cards in this relationship, because the United States, despite the fact that it's trying to find an alternative route and has already started to do that, is still extremely dependent on Pakistan to provide the logistics route for its supplies into Afghanistan. And that's going to be the case for still another year and a half. So I think that the Pakistani government and military know that they are in a strong bargaining position, and it's the United States which primarily is the loser in any deterioration further of relations.
Gareth Porter, investigative journalist, joining us there live from Washington. Thank you very much. A big thank you as well to Shahid Qureshi, political analyst in London, and Mr. Sayyid Ali Wasif, director of the Society for International Reforms and Research, also in Washington. Thanks so much for staying with us here on another edition of News Analysis. From me, Homa Lezgi, it's goodbye.